They say the African night has its own rules. Rules you don't learn from books. Rules you feel in your bones when the sun finally sinks and the savanna exhales into darkness. The air shifts. Not colder exactly, but heavier. Like the land itself is watching you breathe out there. Beneath a sky cracked open with stars, something moves through the grass. At first, it's nothing. Just a ripple, a suggestion, the wind maybe. But then it happens again, closer this time. A shape passes through the pale grasslands, barely breaking the silence. No roar, no chase, no drama announcing its arrival. Just movement, control, certain. And if you were standing there, alone, you'd notice something strange. Your instincts wouldn't scream lion. They wouldn't scream hyena either. They'd hesitate. Because what's coming through the grass doesn't fit the story you've been told about predators. This is the Aardwolf, and it looks like something nature forgot to finish properly. A striped shadow with the body of a hyena's smaller cousin. A raised mane running down its spine like a warning system built out of fur. Eyes that catch the faintest light and return it like a quiet signal in the dark. But here's where things begin to break your expectations. Because in a world where survival usually means teeth and violence, the Aardwolf chose something else entirely. It chose silence, and insects, termites to be exact. Not blood, not flesh, not the chaos of the hunt. Just millions of tiny lives hidden beneath the soil, building empires no one notices during the day. The Aardwolf doesn't chase prey the way you'd expect a predator to. It walks, it listens. It calculates the invisible rhythm of the ground. Its tongue moves like a tool designed by obsession. Fast, repetitive, precise. Licking thousands upon thousands of termites in a single night, as if the world has been reduced to one quiet task. Survive without being seen. But survival is never that simple in Africa. Because the night the Aardwolf belongs to is also the night of lions. Leopards stretched across branches like living traps. Hyenas moving in gangs, laughing in a language older than fear. Every shadow out there has teeth, and the Aardwolf, it has none that matter in a fight. So why does it still walk out there? Why step into a world where almost everything bigger than you can end your story in seconds? The answer isn't strength, it's avoidance. It's adaptation so extreme it almost looks like surrender. But evolution doesn't deal in pride, it deals in what works. Long ago, the ancestors of the Aardwolf weren't like this. They belonged to the hyena line, built for crushing bone, competing for carcasses, surviving on violence and leftovers. But somewhere along the way, one branch stopped following the rules of the feast. While others fought over meat, this one noticed something else. The ground was alive, not in a poetic way. In a literal, endless, overwhelming way. Termite colonies spread across Africa like hidden cities, millions upon millions of them, untouched, ignored, everywhere. No fight required, no rival needed to be driven off. No blood spilled for access, just patience. Generations passed, and the body changed. Teeth became less about destruction and more about simplicity. Jaws lost their killing architecture. The tongue became the real weapon, long, sticky, endlessly working. And slowly something strange happened. A predator stopped being a predator in the traditional sense. But it didn't stop surviving. That's the part that confuses people. Because we're used to thinking survival belongs to the strongest, the fastest, the ones who dominate space and others. The Aardwolf never got that memo. Instead, it learned timing. It learned roots. It learned which termite mounds bloom with life on which nights, like a map written in invisible ink across the savanna floor. But knowing where to feed is only half the story. The other half is not becoming someone else's meal. And that's where the Aardwolf becomes something far more interesting than it first appears. When danger comes close, it doesn't roar, it doesn't charge, it transforms. The mane along its back rises, suddenly changing its silhouette. What looked small becomes something uncertain, something harder to judge in the dark. Because in the wild, hesitation is everything. A predator that hesitates sometimes walks away, and walking away is the difference between life and silence. But there are moments when even disguise isn't enough. When the air itself feels wrong, when a leopard is too close, when a hyena pack drifts too near, their presence felt before it is seen. In those moments, the Aardwolf relies on something less visible but far more unpleasant. Defense system built not on strength, but on disgust. Chemical signals released into the air, sharp enough to make even confident hunters reconsider. It doesn't win fights, it changes decisions, and sometimes that's enough. There was a documented case in South Africa where researchers observing nocturnal wildlife behavior noticed something unusual. A young Aardwolf feeding calmly near a termite field suddenly froze. The grass around it shifted. A spotted hyena had entered the area. What followed wasn't a chase, not immediately. It was a pause. That pause lasted seconds, but in nature, seconds stretch like hours. The hyena approached uncertain. The Aardwolf stood still, mane raised, body angled, not attacking, not fleeing, and then something broke the moment. The hyena turned away. not because it couldn't win, but because it didn't feel certain enough to risk the effort, and the Aardwolf simply continued feeding as if nothing had happened. That's the part that stays with you. Not violence, but hesitation. The invisible space where survival is decided without contact. Most of the Aardwolf's life is like that. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet persistence through a world that could end it at any moment. Night after night, it repeats the same journey, across grasslands that look identical to the untrained eye but are full of invisible meaning to it. Every mound, every scent trail, every shift in soil temperature becomes information. And while other predators define their territory with power, the Aardwolf defines it with memory. But the world is changing faster than memory can adapt. Grasslands shrink, ecosystems fragment, termite populations shift with climate and land use changes. The invisible web the Aardwolf depends on begins to stretch in ways it was never designed for. And that's where the real tension lives. Not in teeth, not in claws, but in disappearance. Because extinction doesn't always arrive like a disaster. Sometimes it arrives like absence. A night where something simply doesn't come back, and no one notices until it's too late. Still, for now, the Aardwolf remains, a ghost walking between worlds, between predator and harmless, between forgotten and essential. And if you ever find yourself under that African sky, listening to the grass move when nothing else should be moving, you might be closer to it than you think. You won't hear it coming. You'll only realize it was there after it's already gone. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden in its existence. Not everything powerful announces itself. Not everything dangerous looks dangerous. And not every survivor survives the way we expect it to. We've spent a long time misunderstanding creatures like the Aardwolf, labeling them as lesser hyenas. Side characters in a story dominated by lions and chaos. But the truth is harder to ignore the more you look at it. The Aardwolf isn't incomplete, it is specialized. And specialization in the wild is both genius and risk. Because when the world matches your design, you thrive beyond competition. But when it shifts even slightly, even perfection starts to struggle, and so the Aardwolf continues its quiet existence, night after night, step after step, feeding on a world most predators ignore, surviving in a space most creatures wouldn't even think to look. A reminder that evolution doesn't always reward aggression. Sometimes it rewards precision, sometimes it rewards patience, and sometimes it rewards the ability to remain unseen in a world that only notices noise. And if that sounds like weakness to you, you haven't been paying attention, because the quietest things in nature are often the ones that outlast everything else.